Hey, it's August 26, 2019. George Webb on the diplomatic back channel reporting right here off the Potomac. Of course, you see William Colby's house not too far away from there. Of course, the person that follows Colby not too far after is a guy by the name of Casey. He's very involved in this Iran-Contra. He's very much a cheerleader for Bill Clinton. He's very much a part of this Jeff Epstein, Iran-Contra, Les Wexner, guns for weapons thing with Mena, Arkansas. And again, Bill Barr is in the thick of it. And what I try to do, sorry about the wind, what I try to do is concentrate on the metadata for Jeff Epstein. That's what's going to unlock the conspiracy. Jeff Epstein is dead. There's no sense in belaboring his death or trying to analyze the cameras and all the metadata and forensics. The effort should be placed on his acquisitions when he was alive, and what is the reason for those acquisitions? Who benefited by those acquisitions? That's going to unwind the network of guns for weapons and this energy, this conflict energy. The reason why you ship the guns to a group like the Contras is to get the energy. You want the offshore drilling rights. In the Bay of Pigs, it was for 12 million acres of Standard Oil drilling rights for oil. That's going to always create the economic incentive for these guns for weapons. So we follow the incentives, we follow the metadata around the investments. Couple of interesting investments. We talked about the one that Jeff Epstein makes for Les Wexner before he leaves Bear Stearns. It's a company called St. Joseph Minerals. It's outside of St. Louis, and St. Joseph Minerals not only has a lot of lead mines, again, that turned into zinc mines, which really can be, the tailings of zinc can actually have a lot of uranium in them, magnesium, manganese, all these other elements. They can be present in the lead slag and the zinc slag. That's going to be present, but they're also a big part of the Manhattan Project. In the Manhattan Project, you had Mallinckrodt was the company that actually did the uranium separation, and they also go into the drug business. So you have a mining company that ends up putting their money into the drug business, illegal drug business. As you know, they have large contracts with the federal government for our Medicare and Medicaid, especially with the VA. So that does seem to be the place where Les Wexner is making an investment with his business partner, the Bronfmans, who we've talked about being kind of the silent partners or the foreign partners, the Canadian partners in all this, the Bank of Montreal and so forth, Charles Bronfman. So a couple of other partners that are interesting in terms of metadata analysis with Jeff Epstein, and that is this guy named Koppel, not Ted Koppel, not the guy with the hair, the Ted Koppel. I don't know any other Koppels that worked at BXT and fuel rods, but this Koppel was back in the Negev Brigade with, again, very close to these Mossad guys, Bob Maxwell, Mark Rich, Ben Gurion, even Bibi Netanyahu to some extent. This goes all the way back. Sam Koppel is his name. He's the first person who brings El Al, the Israeli airline, to New York City. And he's very involved with investments. His daughter-in-law marries Les Wexner. So this is how close and tight this kind of guns for drugs weapon network is. It first is in West Palm Beach, and then it moves in 1995, as we've said, to Columbus, Ohio. When Les Wexner starts this limited company. Now, you don't know a lot about Bob Fitrakis, but we've talked about him. I met him 2.5 years ago when I was researching Seth Rich. He also writes a big expose on Iran-Contra called Spook Air. Spook Air is kind of a tour de force of how the CIA actually did the gun running for drug running with Southern Air Transport, doing these shuttle runs between well, they had daily flights, cargo flights to Hong Kong, for instance. Was Seth Rich on the other end of that? We don't know. We'll get there. But the key idea here is that these investments are in legitimate companies. Once you take over the country, once you get the weapons there, once you get the people trained, the pilots trained, the materiel, you take over the country, then you start doing these leases, long-term leases and contracts. So in that vein, no pun intended, St. Joe Minerals had extensive holdings in Peru, extensive holdings in South America. So is that why Les Wexner bought the company? We don't know. Other folks have said, you know, you just start with Zorro Ranch, one county north, and Sandoval County north of Albuquerque. Again, the ranch, the Zorro Ranch, is sold to Jeff Epstein by the governor, by the then governor. Talk about state support, by the then governor Bill King. So you can feel the weather coming up here, so sorry about the fluffle on the audio, but Bill King, the state senator in this large ranch, sells Jeff Epstein the Zorro Ranch. Is that a base of operations for uranium operations? This one commenter said, just draw a 111-mile circle around that and remember all the things that are encircled. First, the state capitol. You need the state capitol in order to have access to the National Guard armies for diverting weapons. You have 2 national laboratories there. Of course, you've got Sandia National Laboratory and Los Alamos. We're learning a lot about the spying way back when of DeMoran shells and a guy named Fomenko. We'll get to that later. But it seems like spying activities have gone on with Russians and Germans in Los Alamos since the beginning. We've also got White Sands Missile Range down by Fort Bliss. There's where you can do missile testing and so forth. And then, of course, you have other reserve areas, Army reserve areas, and Indian reservations that can be used for mining operations, all within this 111-mile circle. I remember going to Albuquerque and seeing all the hills around it and seeing how much mining operations was going on back then. So that's one purchase that's interesting. The Zorro Ranch is very interesting. One of his pilots, called VISO-SKI, I call him Viscosity. He purchases a place in West Palm Beach training pilots. He also has a house in the Zorro Ranch training pilots. So was this actually kind of a cutout for teaching DynCorp pilots to do border surveillance? We know DynCorp did that. We know Jeff taught pilots doing that. Was this an area where there was a lot of pilots and Zorro Ranch was just a cutout for that? Remember, the Z division in the Department of Energy is the security division in the Department